Marcus Thompson stepped out of his old Toyota Camry and looked up at the tall glass building in front of him. The Grand Vista Hotel stood like a shiny palace against the blue sky. Its golden doors sparkled in the afternoon sun, and fancy cars were parked all around the entrance. Marcus felt his heart beat faster with excitement. This was going to be the best weekend of his life. At 22 years old, Marcus had just finished college and landed his dream job at Peterson Marketing, one of the biggest companies in the city. After years of studying hard and working part-time, jobs to pay for school, he finally had some money to spend on himself. He had saved up for 3 months just to book this one special weekend at the Grand Vista Hotel. Marcus straightened his blue button-down shirt and checked his reflection in the car window. He wanted to look perfect. His mother had always taught him to dress nicely and speak politely, especially in fancy places where people might judge him quickly. He grabbed his small suitcase from the back seat and walked toward the hotel entrance. With confident steps, the lobby took his breath away. Everything was made of white marble that shone like mirrors. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, throwing rainbow colors across the walls. Soft piano music played in the background and the air smelled like expensive flowers. Marcus had never been in such a beautiful place before. Well-dressed people moved through the lobby like they belonged there. Women wore designer dresses and diamond jewelry, while men in expensive suits talked on their phones about business deals. Marcus felt a little nervous, but he reminded himself that he had every right to be there. He had paid for his room just like everyone else. Marcus walked across the smooth marble floor, his shoes making small clicking sounds. He approached the front desk where a large man with gray hair stood behind the counter. The man wore a name tag that said, David Richardson, Hotel Manager. Marcus smiled warmly and prepared to check in. But the moment Richardson looked up and saw Marcus walking toward him, his friendly expression changed completely. His blue eyes turned cold, and his mouth formed a thin, hard line. He looked Marcus up and down slowly, like he was examining something dirty that had walked into his clean hotel. "Can I help you?" Richardson asked in a voice that clearly showed he did not want to help at all. Marcus kept his smile bright and polite. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm here to check in. I have a reservation under the name Marcus Thompson." Richardson did not even look at his computer screen. He did not check any paperwork or reservation lists. Instead, he crossed his arms over his chest and shook his head firmly. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake," Richardson said loudly enough for other people nearby to hear. "Someone like you couldn't possibly have a reservation at the Grand Vista Hotel." Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. The words hit him hard, but he tried to stay calm. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't understand. I booked my room online 3 weeks ago. Let me show you my confirmation." Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He opened his email and found the confirmation message from the hotel. The screen clearly showed his name, the dates of his stay, the room number, and the amount he had paid, $450 for 2 nights in a junior suite. "Here it is, sir," Marcus said, holding his phone toward Richardson. "I paid with my credit card. Everything is confirmed." Richardson barely glanced at the phone screen before waving his hand dismissively. "That's probably fake, or stolen. Young people like you are always trying to scam their way into nice places with stolen credit cards and fake documents." The words felt like slaps across Marcus's face. He could feel his cheeks burning with shame and anger. Other guests in the lobby had stopped their conversations and were now staring at him. Some whispered to each other while pointing in his direction. "Sir, I can assure you that my payment is completely legitimate," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I can call my bank right now to verify the transaction. I can show you my ID, my credit card, anything you need." But Richardson's voice grew louder and more aggressive. "Listen, boy, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it won't work here. The Grand Vista Hotel has standards. We cater to a certain type of clientele, and frankly, you don't fit the profile." Marcus felt his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He looked around the lobby and saw that more people had gathered to watch the scene. Hotel employees stopped their work to stare. Some guests held up their phones, probably recording everything. "I don't understand what you mean by profile, sir," Marcus said quietly. I'm a paying customer with a confirmed reservation. What exactly is the problem? Richardson stepped closer to the desk, his face red with anger. The problem is that I know trouble when I see it. Young men like you come in here thinking you can cause problems, steal from our guests, or worse. I won't have it in my hotel. An elderly white woman in a fur coat nodded her head in agreement. A businessman in a gray suit whispered something to his companion, and they both laughed quietly. Marcus felt completely alone in the crowd of people who seemed to support Richardson's behavior. Sir, I'm not here to cause any trouble, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper now. I just want to check into my room. I've been looking forward to this weekend for months. I saved up all my money from my new job just to stay here. Richardson laughed in a cruel way that made Marcus feel even smaller. New job? Let me guess. You work at some fast food place, or maybe you clean offices at night? Son, do you have any idea how much it costs to stay here? This isn't some cheap motel where you can pay by the hour. Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He would not give Richardson the satisfaction of seeing him cry. I work at Peterson Marketing. I'm a junior account executive. And yes, sir, I know exactly how much this room costs because I paid for it myself. Peterson Marketing? Richardson laughed again. Right. And I'm the President of the United States. Security, he called out loudly. We have a situation here. 2. Large security guards in black uniforms began walking toward the front desk. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't supposed to be how his celebration weekend started. Please, sir, Marcus said desperately. Just check your computer. Call Peterson Marketing if you want. My boss's name is Sarah Chen. She can verify that I work there. This is all just a misunderstanding. But Richardson had already made up his mind. The only misunderstanding here is you thinking you could waltz into my hotel and pull some kind of scam. I want you out of here right now before I call the police and have you arrested for attempted fraud. Marcus looked around the lobby one last time. Every face stared back at him with judgment, disgust, or amusement. No one stepped forward to help him. No one questioned Richardson's behavior. In that moment, Marcus realized that no matter how hard he had worked, how much he had achieved, or how politely he behaved, some people would always see him as someone who didn't belong. With his head held as high as he could manage, Marcus turned and walked toward the golden doors that had seemed so welcoming just minutes before. Behind him, he could hear Richardson telling the other guests that he was sorry they had to witness such an unpleasant scene, but that the hotel's security was excellent and they had nothing to worry about. As Marcus pushed through the revolving door, he heard Richardson's final words echoing through the marble lobby. We simply cannot allow people like that to lower the standards of our establishment. The afternoon sun felt too bright on Marcus's face as he stood on the sidewalk outside the Grand Vista Hotel. His celebration weekend had turned into the most humiliating experience of his life, and he knew that what happened next would change everything. Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside the Grand Vista Hotel, feeling like the whole world was spinning around him. His hands were shaking, and his heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. People walked past him on the busy street, but he felt completely alone. The golden doors of the hotel seemed to mock him as they reflected the afternoon sunlight. He walked slowly to his car, his legs feeling heavy like they were made of stone. Marcus sat in the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. He just stared at the steering wheel, trying to understand what had just happened to him. All his life, his parents had told him that if he worked hard, studied well, and treated people with respect, he would be treated fairly in return. But the last 30 minutes had shattered that belief completely. Marcus pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. His thumb hovered over his mother's contact information. He had always been proud of being independent. Even in college, when money was tight and he ate ramen noodles for dinner every night, he rarely asked his parents for help. He wanted to prove that he could make it on his own, without relying on his family's success or influence. But this was different. This wasn't about money or grades or getting a job. This was about being treated like a human being, and Richardson had failed that basic test completely. Marcus knew he couldn't let this slide. If he walked away quietly, Richardson would do the same thing to other young black men who tried to stay at his hotel. Marcus took a deep breath and pressed his mother's number. The phone rang twice before he heard her familiar, warm voice. "Marcus, how's my successful son doing? Are you settled into your fancy hotel room yet?" Dr. Victoria Thompson asked cheerfully. Just hearing his mother's voice made Marcus feel like crying. He tried to speak, but his throat felt tight and dry. "Mom, something happened." Dr. Thompson's tone changed immediately. She had been a lawyer for over 25 years, and she knew the sound of distress when she heard it. "What's wrong, baby? Tell me everything." Marcus closed his eyes and began to tell his mother about his experience at the Grand Vista Hotel. He described how excited he had been, how beautiful the lobby looked, and how quickly everything had gone wrong. He told her about Richardson's cold stare, his cruel words, and the way other guests had watched and done nothing to help. As Marcus spoke, Dr. Thompson listened in complete silence. This was not unusual for her. She had learned long ago that the best way to understand a situation was to let people tell their story without interruption. But Marcus could feel the anger building in her silence, like a storm gathering strength before it hits. "He said people like me don't belong there, Mom," Marcus continued, his voice breaking slightly. "He called me boy and accused me of using stolen credit cards. Everyone was staring at me like I was some kind of criminal. I've never felt so small in my entire life." When Marcus finished his story, Dr. Thompson was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke in a voice that was calm, but filled with steel. "Marcus, I need you to answer some questions for me, and I need you to think carefully before you respond." "Okay, Mom. Did anyone record what happened? Did you see people with their phones out?" Marcus thought back to the scene in the lobby. "Yes, I think so. I saw at least 3 people holding up their phones when Richardson was yelling at me." "Good. Do you remember exactly what time this happened?" "It was around 2:30 in the afternoon. I remember because I was supposed to check in at 3 and I wanted to arrive early." "What was the manager's full name again?" "David Richardson. His name tag said he was the hotel manager." Dr. Thompson was taking notes now, and Marcus could hear her pen scratching against paper. "Were there any hotel employees nearby who witnessed this?" "Yes, there were 2 front desk clerks and at least 4 other staff members. They all just stood there and watched it happen." "And you have all your reservation documents, correct? The confirmation email? The credit card statement showing the payment?" "Everything is on my phone, Mom." I showed it to him, but he wouldn't even look at it properly. Dr. Thompson was quiet again, but Marcus could practically hear her legal mind working. She had built her career on cases like this, fighting discrimination and holding people accountable for their prejudice. She had won millions of dollars in settlements for clients who had been treated unfairly because of their race, and she had sent a clear message to businesses that discrimination would not be tolerated. "Marcus, I need you to stay exactly where you are," Dr. Thompson said firmly. "Do not leave the hotel area. Go sit in the coffee shop across the street if there is one, or find somewhere nearby where you can wait comfortably." "Why, Mom? What are you going to do?" "I'm going to do what I do best, baby. I'm going to make sure that Mr. Richardson and the Grand Vista Hotel understand that their behavior has consequences." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and worry. He knew his mother was one of the most respected civil rights lawyers in the state, but he also knew that her involvement would make this situation much bigger than just a simple hotel reservation problem. "Mom, I don't want to cause a huge scene or anything. Maybe we should just forget about it and find another hotel." "Absolutely not," Dr. Thompson said, her voice growing stronger. "Marcus, what happened to you today wasn't just about you. It was about every young black person who has ever been made to feel like they don't belong somewhere they have every right to be. If we let Richardson get away with this, he'll keep doing it to others." Marcus knew his mother was right, but he still felt nervous about what would happen next. "What should I do while I wait?" "Write down everything you remember, every word Richardson said, every person who was there, every detail you can think of." "And Marcus?" "Yes, Mom? I'm proud of you for staying calm and dignified in there. You Handled yourself exactly the way your father and I raised you to handle difficult situations. After hanging up the phone, Marcus walked across the street to a small coffee shop called Been There, Done That. He ordered a large coffee and found a table by the window where he could see the Grand Vista Hotel. As he sat there writing down everything that had happened, he noticed that his hands had stopped shaking. Meanwhile, across town in her law office, Dr. Victoria Thompson was making phone calls that would change everything. She called her paralegal and asked her to pull all the research on hotel discrimination cases from the past 5 years. She called her junior partner and asked him to prepare federal discrimination complaint forms. She called her media contact at Channel 7 News, who had covered several of her previous cases. But the most important call she made was to her old friend, Judge Patricia Williams, who had been fighting civil rights cases even longer than Dr. Thompson had. "Patricia, it's Victoria. I need you to tell me everything you know about the Grand Vista Hotel and their management practices." Judge Williams was quiet for a moment. "Oh, Victoria, has something happened to Marcus?" "How did you know?" "Because the Grand Vista Hotel has a reputation, my dear. You're not the first parent to call me about discrimination there. That manager, Richardson, has been a problem for years." Dr. Thompson felt her anger growing even stronger. "Why hasn't anyone stopped him?" "Because most people don't have the resources or the knowledge to fight back effectively. But you do, Victoria. And if anyone can put an end to Richardson's behavior, it's you." As Dr. Thompson hung up the phone, she looked at her watch. It was 3:45 p.m. In exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes, she would walk through the golden doors of the Grand Vista Hotel, and David Richardson would discover that he had made the biggest mistake of his career. She opened her briefcase and began pulling out legal documents that would turn Richardson's comfortable world upside down. This was going to be a fight, but it was a fight she had been preparing for her entire career. And she had never lost a case like this. At exactly 5 p.m., a shiny black Mercedes pulled up in front of the Grand Vista Hotel. The car was so clean it looked like a mirror, reflecting the golden hotel doors and the late afternoon sky. Marcus, who was still sitting in the coffee shop across the street, sat up straight in his chair when he saw the familiar car. His heart started beating faster, but this time it wasn't from fear or shame. It was from anticipation. Dr. Victoria Thompson stepped out of the driver's seat like she owned the entire street. She was 55 years old, but she moved with the energy and confidence of someone half her age. Her black business suit fit perfectly, and her silver jewelry caught the sunlight as she adjusted her briefcase. Her hair was pulled back in a neat style that made her look both professional and powerful. Behind her, 2 more cars pulled up. A young black woman in a gray suit got out of the first car, carrying a thick folder of papers. A middle-aged Latino man in a navy blue suit emerged from the second car, talking quietly on his phone, while balancing a laptop bag on his shoulder. These were Dr. Thompson's legal team, and they looked ready for battle. Marcus watched from the coffee shop window as his mother checked her watch and said something to her team. They all nodded seriously, like soldiers receiving final instructions before an important mission. Dr. Thompson looked up at the tall hotel building, her expression calm but determined. She had fought many battles in courtrooms and boardrooms, but this one was personal. Inside the Grand Vista Hotel, David Richardson was having the best day he'd had in weeks. He was telling his assistant manager, Carol, about how he had handled the situation earlier that afternoon. He felt proud of himself for protecting the hotel's reputation and keeping out the kind of people who might cause trouble. "You should have seen him, Carol," Richardson said with a nasty smile. "This young punk thought he could just walk in here, like he belonged. I shut that down real quick. These people need to learn their place." Carol, a middle-aged black woman who had worked at the hotel for 10 years, listened quietly. She had heard Richardson make comments like this before, and it always made her stomach feel sick. But she needed her job to support her family, so she usually just stayed quiet and tried to avoid him as much as possible. "Mr. Richardson," Carol said carefully, "what if he really did have a reservation? What if his payment was legitimate?" Richardson waved his hand dismissively. "Impossible. I can spot a scammer from a mile away. Besides, Even if he did somehow manage to book a room, we can't have people like that mixing with our real guests. It's bad for business. Just then, the golden revolving doors began to turn, and Dr. Victoria Thompson walked into the lobby. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with a steady, confident rhythm that seemed to echo through the entire space. The soft piano music continued playing, but somehow the whole atmosphere in the lobby changed the moment she entered. Dr. Thompson looked around the elegant lobby, taking in every detail. She noticed the crystal chandeliers, the expensive furniture, and the well-dressed guests who were scattered throughout the space. But most importantly, she noticed David Richardson standing behind the front desk, still talking and laughing with. Carol Richardson looked up when he heard the clicking of heels on marble. He saw a distinguished black woman in an expensive suit walking toward him, followed by two other professional-looking people. His first thought was that she must be some kind of businesswoman, maybe here for a conference or meeting. He straightened his tie and put on his best customer service smile. "Good evening, madam," Richardson said in his most polite voice. "How may I assist you today?" Dr. Thompson stopped directly in front of the front desk and placed her hands on the marble counter. She looked Richardson straight in the eyes, and her gaze was so intense that his smile began to fade. "Good evening, Mr. Richardson," she said, in a voice that was calm but carried unmistakable authority. "My name is Dr. Victoria Thompson. I believe we need to have a conversation about an incident that occurred here this afternoon." Richardson's face went slightly pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. "I'm sorry, Dr. Thompson, but I'm not sure what incident you're referring to. We've had a very quiet day here at the Grand Vista." Dr. Thompson reached into her briefcase and pulled out a business card, which she placed on the counter between them. Richardson picked it up and read, "Dr. Victoria Thompson, Senior Partner, Thompson & Associates, Civil Rights Law Firm." Richardson's hands began to shake slightly as he read the card. He had heard that name before. Dr. Victoria Thompson was famous in the city for winning big discrimination cases against hotels, restaurants, and other businesses. Just last year, she had won a $15 million settlement against the Continental hotel chain for racial discrimination. "Mr. Richardson," Dr. Thompson continued, "at approximately 2:30 this afternoon, a young man named Marcus Thompson came to this hotel to check into a reservation he had made and paid for 3 weeks ago. According to multiple witnesses, you refused to honor his reservation and had him removed from the premises based solely on his race." Richardson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked around the lobby and noticed that several guests had stopped their conversations to listen. Carol, who was standing next to him, took a small step away from the front desk. "Dr. Thompson, I think there's been some misunderstanding," Richardson said, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't recall any incident like that. Perhaps there was some confusion about the reservation system." Dr. Thompson's junior partner, the young woman in the gray suit, stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the counter. "Mr. Richardson, we have statements from 3 hotel guests who witnessed the entire encounter. We also have security camera footage from your own surveillance system, which we will be requesting through a court order first thing Monday morning." Richardson felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "Security cameras? I'm not sure our cameras were working properly today." "Oh, but they were working perfectly," said Dr. Thompson's other associate, the man in the navy blue suit. "We've already spoken with your head of security, who confirmed that all cameras in the lobby were functioning normally this afternoon." Dr. Thompson opened her briefcase again and pulled out several official-looking documents. "Mr. Richardson, I'm here to inform you that my client intends to file a federal discrimination lawsuit against both you personally and the Grand Vista Hotel. The charges will include racial discrimination, violation of civil rights under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and breach of contract." Richardson's face had gone completely white now. He looked around desperately, hoping to see the general manager or someone who could help him handle this situation. But the general manager was in a meeting, and Richardson was completely alone. "Dr. Thompson, please, I'm sure we can work this out," Richardson said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe there was a communication error. If your client would like to reschedule his stay, I'd be happy to accommodate him at no charge." Dr. Thompson smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who knew she had already won the case. Mr. Richardson, do you remember what you said to my client when he showed you his valid reservation confirmation? Richardson's throat felt dry. I don't recall the exact words. You told him that someone like him couldn't possibly afford a room at this hotel. You accused him of using stolen credit cards. You said that the Grand Vista Hotel has standards and that he clearly didn't fit the profile. You called him boy and threatened to have him arrested for fraud. With each word Dr. Thompson spoke, Richardson seemed to shrink smaller behind the front desk. Other guests in the lobby had stopped pretending not to listen and were now openly staring at the confrontation. You also told my client, Dr. Thompson continued, that you simply cannot allow people like that to lower the standards of your establishment. Mr. Richardson, those are your exact words, witnessed by multiple people and recorded on your security cameras. Richardson realized that his comfortable world was crashing down around him. The young man he had dismissed and humiliated wasn't just any college graduate. He was the son of one of the most powerful civil rights lawyers in the state. And now, that lawyer was standing in his lobby, armed with evidence and ready to destroy his career. Dr. Thompson, Richardson said desperately, I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. I would never intentionally discriminate against anyone. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. But Dr. Thompson shook her head firmly. Mr. Richardson, the time for private discussions ended when you chose to publicly humiliate my client in front of a lobby full of people. What happens next will be very public indeed. As she spoke these words, Richardson noticed something that made his blood run cold. A news van was pulling up outside the hotel, and a reporter with a camera crew was getting out. Dr. Thompson had not come alone, and she had not come quietly. The storm that Marcus's phone call had started was about to hit the Grand Vista Hotel with full force. The lobby of the Grand Vista Hotel had never been so quiet. Every conversation had stopped, every phone call had ended. Even the soft piano music seemed to fade into the background as Dr. Victoria Thompson's words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. David Richardson stood behind the marble counter, looking like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse in front of his eyes. Dr. Thompson's junior partner opened the thick folder she had been carrying and began pulling out document after document. Each paper she placed on the counter made Richardson's face grow paler. There were legal precedents, civil rights violation reports, and case studies of similar discrimination lawsuits that had cost other hotels millions of dollars. Mr. Richardson, Dr. Thompson said calmly, let me explain exactly what is going to happen over the next few days. First, we will file a formal complaint with the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Then we will submit a civil rights violation report to the Department of Justice. After that, we will file a federal lawsuit seeking damages for emotional distress, punitive damages for willful discrimination, and compensatory damages for the violation of my client's civil rights. Richardson tried to speak, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. Dr. Thompson, surely we can resolve this matter without involving federal agencies. Perhaps the hotel could offer some form of compensation. Compensation? Dr. Thompson's voice rose slightly, and several guests near the front desk took a step back. Mr. Richardson, you think you can pay your way out of deliberately humiliating a young man because of the color of his skin? You think money can undo the damage you've done to his dignity and self-respect? Just then, the elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and a tall man in an expensive gray suit hurried across the lobby. His face was red with panic and sweat. Stains were visible under his arms despite the cool air conditioning. This was Robert Sterling, the general manager of the Grand Vista Hotel, and he looked like a man running toward a fire he knew he couldn't put out. Dr. Thompson, Sterling said breathlessly as he approached the front desk. I'm Robert Sterling, the general manager. I just received several urgent phone calls about a situation involving one of our staff members. I came down immediately to see how we can resolve this matter. Dr. Thompson turned to face Sterling, and her expression didn't soften even slightly. Mr. Sterling, I'm pleased to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Your employee, Mr. Richardson, has created a serious legal problem for your hotel. Sterling looked back and forth between Dr. Thompson and Richardson, trying to understand the full scope of the disaster he was facing. Dr. Thompson, if there has been some misunderstanding or inappropriate behavior, I assure you that the Grand Vista Hotel does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Misunderstanding? Dr. Thompson repeated the word like it tasted bitter in her mouth. Mr. Sterling, let me read you exactly what your employee said to my client. She pulled out a small notebook and began reading from it in a clear, loud voice that carried throughout the lobby. He told my client that someone like him couldn't possibly afford a room at such an upscale establishment. He accused my client of using stolen credit cards without any evidence whatsoever. He stated that the Grand Vista Hotel has standards to maintain and that my client clearly didn't belong in such a refined environment. He called my client boy and threatened to have him arrested for fraud when my client tried to show his valid reservation confirmation. With each quoted phrase, Sterling's face grew more horrified. He had been in the hotel business for 20 years, and he knew that these were exactly the kinds of statements that led to massive lawsuits and permanent damage to a hotel's reputation. Richardson, meanwhile, was desperately trying to interrupt. Mr. Sterling, I was just trying to protect the hotel's security. Sometimes you have to make quick judgments about people who might cause trouble. Stop talking, Sterling said sharply to Richardson, then turned back to Dr. Thompson. Dr. Thompson, on behalf of the Grand Vista Hotel, I want to apologize sincerely for this incident. Mr. Richardson's behavior was completely unacceptable and does not represent the values of our establishment. But Dr. Thompson was not finished. She nodded to her male associate, who opened his laptop and began reading from the screen. Mr. Sterling, we've done some research on your hotel's history. In the past 3 years, the Grand Vista has received 12 complaints of discriminatory treatment from black guests. 7 of those complaints specifically mentioned Mr. Richardson by name. Sterling felt his knees go weak. 12 complaints? I was never informed of any pattern. According to our investigation, Dr. Thompson's associate continued, these complaints were handled internally and never reported to the appropriate authorities. In several cases, guests were offered small compensations like free meals or room upgrades in exchange for agreeing not to pursue the matter further. The lobby had become completely silent except for the sound of Dr. Thompson's team presenting their evidence. Guests stood frozen in place, listening to every word. Some had their phones out, recording the confrontation. Others whispered quietly to each other about what they were witnessing. Richardson tried one more desperate attempt to save himself. Dr. Thompson, I've worked in hotels for 15 years. I've always tried to maintain high standards for our guests' safety and comfort. Sometimes decisions have to be made quickly, and maybe I made an error in judgment today. Dr. Thompson turned to face Richardson directly, and her eyes were filled with cold fury. An error in judgment? Mr. Richardson, you looked at my son and decided he was a criminal based on nothing but the color of his skin. You humiliated him in front of dozens of people. You threatened to have him arrested for the crime of trying to check into a hotel room he had legitimately paid for. That wasn't an error in judgment, that was racism, pure and simple. The word racism echoed through the marble lobby like a gunshot. Several guests gasped audibly. Richardson's face turned bright red, and he began shaking his head frantically. No, that's not what happened, Richardson protested. I would never... I don't see color when I look at people. I treat everyone the same. Dr. Thompson's junior partner stepped forward with another document. Mr. Richardson, we interviewed the 3 guests who witnessed the incident. All of them confirmed that you used racially charged language and made assumptions about my client based solely on his appearance. One witness, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, said she was disgusted by the obvious prejudice she observed. Sterling looked around the lobby and realized that his hotel's reputation was being destroyed in real time. Guests were taking pictures and videos. Some were already posting on social media. He could imagine the headlines in tomorrow's newspapers and the reviews that would appear on travel websites. Dr. Thompson, Sterling said desperately, what can we do to make this right? How can the Grand Vista Hotel demonstrate that we take this matter seriously? Dr. Thompson smiled, but it was Not a warm smile. Mr. Sterling, the time for private solutions ended when your employee chose to make his discrimination public. What happens next will be equally public. She gestured toward the hotel's front windows, where a small crowd of reporters and camera crews had gathered. The news van that had arrived earlier was now joined by 2 more vehicles from different television stations. The media is very interested in this story, Dr. Thompson continued. A young college graduate celebrating his first professional job is humiliated and thrown out of a luxury hotel because of his race. A hotel with a documented history of discriminatory practices. A manager who has been allowed to continue this behavior for years without consequences. Richardson suddenly realized that his career in the hotel industry was over. Even if he somehow kept his job at the Grand Vista, no other respectable hotel would ever hire him after this story went public. His discriminatory behavior, which he had always been able to hide behind corporate policies and quiet settlements, was about to be exposed to the entire city. "Dr. Thompson," Richardson said, his voice breaking. "I have a family. I have 2 children in college. If this story goes public, I'll never work in hospitality again. Please, isn't there some way we can handle this privately?" Dr. Thompson looked at Richardson for a long moment, and for the first time, her expression softened slightly. But when she spoke, her voice remained firm. "Mr. Richardson, my son also has a future to think about. When you humiliated him today, did you consider how it might affect his confidence, his self-esteem, his willingness to believe that he belongs in professional settings?" Richardson had no answer for that question. Dr. Thompson turned back to Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, here are the hotel's options. You can cooperate fully with our investigation, implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff, establish clear policies for handling discrimination complaints, and accept responsibility for the pattern of discriminatory behavior at your establishment. Or you can fight us in court, where this case will receive even more media attention and cost you significantly more money." Sterling looked at Richardson, then back at Dr. Thompson. The choice was obvious, but he knew that either path would be expensive and damaging to the hotel's reputation. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson walked through the same golden revolving doors of the Grand Vista Hotel. But this time, everything was different. The marble lobby looked exactly the same. Crystal chandeliers still hung from the high ceiling. Soft piano music still played in the background and well-dressed guests still moved through the elegant space. But the atmosphere had completely changed. Marcus was no longer a humiliated young man trying to check into a hotel room. Today he wore a sharp navy blue suit and carried a leather briefcase. He was here as a guest speaker for the hotel's monthly diversity and inclusion training session, something that had never existed before his mother's legal victory transformed the Grand Vista Hotel forever. At the front desk, a friendly young woman named Sarah greeted every guest with genuine warmth. She had been hired as part of the hotel's new commitment to diverse staffing and excellent customer service training. Next to her stood James Chen, the new assistant manager, who had been specifically chosen for his experience in creating inclusive hospitality environments. David Richardson was nowhere to be seen. He had been fired immediately after Dr. Victoria Thompson's confrontation 6 months ago. The hotel's board of directors had terminated his employment within 48 hours of the incident, and he had been unable to find work in the hospitality industry since then. Local newspapers had covered the story extensively, and Richardson's name had become associated with discrimination and poor judgment throughout the city. Marcus walked across the lobby toward the conference room, where 30 hotel employees were waiting for his presentation. As he passed the spot where Richardson had humiliated him, Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was still some sadness about what had happened, but mostly he felt proud of how he and his mother had turned a terrible experience into positive change. The legal settlement had been substantial. Dr. Thompson had negotiated a financial compensation package that included money for Marcus's emotional distress, punitive damages against the hotel, and a commitment to fund anti-discrimination training programs. But more importantly, the case had created lasting changes that would help other people avoid the same humiliation Marcus had experienced. In the conference room, Marcus stood in front of the hotel staff and began telling his story. He described the excitement he had felt about celebrating his new job, the shock and pain of Richardson's treatment, and the way the experience had affected his confidence and self-worth. The employees listened carefully, many taking notes as Marcus explained how discrimination felt from the victim's perspective. "I want you to understand," Marcus said to the group, "that when someone treats you differently because of your race, it doesn't just hurt in that moment. It makes you question everything about yourself. It makes you wonder if you really belong in professional settings, if you really deserve the opportunities you've worked hard for, and if other people will ever see you as just a person instead of a stereotype." A young hotel clerk named Maria raised her hand. "Marcus, how did you find the strength to fight back instead of just accepting what happened?" Marcus smiled at the question. "I didn't find that strength by myself. My mother taught me that staying silent about injustice doesn't protect you. It just allows the injustice to continue and hurt other people. She showed me that speaking up, even when it's scary, can create positive change that helps everyone." After Marcus finished his presentation, the hotel's new general manager, Dr. Patricia Williams, stood up to address the staff. Dr. Williams was a Black woman with extensive experience in hotel management and civil rights advocacy. She had been hired specifically to transform the Grand Vista's culture and ensure that discrimination would never happen again. "What happened to Marcus 6 months ago was unacceptable," Dr. Williams said firmly. "But it also gave us an opportunity to become a better hotel and a better workplace. Every single person in this room has the power to make sure every guest feels welcome and respected." The changes at the Grand Vista Hotel went far beyond training sessions. The hotel had implemented a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. They had created a guest advocacy program where customers could report concerns directly to corporate headquarters. They had also established partnerships with local civil rights organizations to ensure ongoing accountability. The suite that Marcus had originally booked was now called the Equality Suite, and it displayed a small plaque explaining the hotel's commitment to treating all guests with dignity and respect. The revenue from that room was donated monthly to a scholarship fund for students from underrepresented communities who wanted to study hospitality management. Marcus's story had also attracted national attention. Dr. Thompson's legal victory had been featured in civil rights publications and law journals across the country. The case had become a model for how discrimination victims could seek justice and create meaningful change. Other hotels and businesses had proactively updated their policies and training programs to avoid similar legal challenges. 3 months after the settlement, Marcus had received a phone call that changed his life direction completely. A major civil rights organization in Washington, D.C., had offered him a position as a youth advocacy coordinator. The job involved traveling to colleges and universities, speaking about discrimination and civil rights, and helping young people understand how to advocate for themselves and others. Marcus had accepted the position immediately. His experience at the Grand Vista Hotel, as painful as it had been, had given him a powerful platform to help other people. He discovered that he had a talent for public speaking and a passion for education that he had never known existed. Dr. Victoria Thompson had also seen her legal practice grow significantly after the Grand Vista case. The media attention had brought her dozens of new clients who had experienced discrimination in hotels, restaurants, workplaces, and other businesses. She had won several more major settlements and had become one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in the region. But the change that meant the most to both Marcus and his mother was personal. Their relationship had grown even stronger through the experience of fighting injustice together. Marcus had learned that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of wisdom. Dr. Thompson had been reminded of why she had become a lawyer in the first place, to protect people who needed protection and to fight for a more just society. On this particular day, as Marcus finished his presentation and prepared to leave the Grand Vista Hotel, he walked past the front desk, where Sarah was helping a young Black businessman check into his room. The transaction was smooth, friendly, and completely professional. The businessman smiled as Sarah handed him his keycard and explained the hotel's amenities. Marcus watched this simple interaction and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what justice looked like, not just punishment for wrongdoing, but systemic change that prevented future wrongdoing. The young businessman would never experience what Marcus had experienced, because Marcus and his mother had refused to let discrimination go unchallenged. As Marcus stepped through the golden, revolving doors for the last time that day, he thought about how much his life had changed since that terrible afternoon 6 months ago. He had a new career that gave him purpose and meaning. He had discovered strengths he didn't know he possessed. Most importantly, he had learned that one person's courage to speak up against injustice could create ripple effects that helped countless other people. The Grand Vista Hotel now stood as a symbol of transformation rather than discrimination. Other businesses in the city had taken notice of the changes and had begun implementing similar programs to ensure inclusive service for all customers. Marcus's story had become a reminder that dignity and respect should be basic rights, not privileges that depend on someone's race, background, or appearance. Marcus got into his car and drove toward the airport, where he would catch a flight to his next speaking engagement at a university in another state. As he drove through the city streets, he smiled, thinking about how many young people he would meet tomorrow who needed to hear that their voices mattered and that justice was possible when people had the courage to fight for it. The humiliation that had started at the Grand Vista Hotel had been transformed into hope, education, and positive change that would continue long after Marcus's story faded from the headlines. That transformation was the most powerful victory of all.